since the last time we spoke, have either of you bagged yourself a rich man? Have either of you gotten together with a billionaire?
I believe I am still happily married to the same guy I was married to last time.
I read a lot of novels about bagging rich men, but I have not done so myself. I am also still married to the same guy I was last time around.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luse, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Whether this is your first time watching the show or you're a bona fide fan, welcome to It's Been a Minute on video. Today, we're jumping into the discourse that runs the internet: dating, finances, and the myth of hypergamy. So to get into this, I've got Wailin Wong, longtime business and economics journalist and co-host of The Indicator. Hi, Wailin.
Hey, Brittany.
Welcome, welcome. And I've also got Reema Khrais, host of Marketplace's This Is Uncomfortable, a show all about life and how money messes with it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
All right, so I want to start off with how money shows up in dating. I can remember being on dates before I met my husband, and when I think back on it, like even questions that me and the guy were asking each other were both kind of, about money in some ways,
right,
even if we didn't mean for it to be. Like I'm sure depending on, like who's asking or how it's asked, like it can be more or less intentional. But I don't know, it kind of gets at how money influences like so much of how we move through the world.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I've had so many conversations over the years with folks who are dating and are navigating all of this. And I think like you said, even when nobody's actually talking about money, people are constantly reading and sending cues about things like stability and generosity and class and what kind of life they want to build, right? And so, like you're alluding to, a lot of those early decisions in dating are just shaped by logistics. Who can afford to live alone versus having roommates? That affects things like privacy, where you spend your time, who can travel or say yes to a spontaneous weekend away. All of those things, I think, can often end up setting the pace of a relationship. And like, it's really interesting because I think those differences can also quietly shape the power dynamics of a relationship. Of who's adapting to whom,
Say more. Yeah, say more about that.
I feel like, and maybe I'm also thinking of like my early experiences in my 20s, but oftentimes it's the person who has more money gets to dictate a lot of the decisions around the relationship of like, who's compromising. And I feel like over time that can influence how equal or how easy the relationship feels, even if like no one is explicitly framing it as a money issue.
I had a conversation with a former friend about a girlfriend of his at the time. And he was saying how I didn't know anything about her like economic circumstances, but I knew that he was of some means and like some family means, not like work means, like family means. Like means,
like
not paycheck means, like means. And he was like, for her birthday, I'm trying to think of what to get her. She said she had $700 left of credit card debt. Like, should I just pay that off for her? And I was
that sounds nice.
I mean, I told him, I said, that sounds nice. But I was like, if you're not living together and if you're not
that's huge.
Yeah, if you're not living together, and it's something she mentioned in passing. I'm like, if you're not living together, and also too, like, I was like, I don't know her situation, but if $700 is an amount that she's not paying off in one fell swoop, right? Then I imagine that's different than your situation, and she might take that. She might not take that as you intended. Right. It might feel like one of those early power moves, like you're talking about.
Yeah,
especially paternalistic.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, especially because, it's funny. I've talked with a lot of people over the years about dating and money, and I can think of like two couples in particular who have like a very similar dynamic where they came from different financial backgrounds, and one of them really wanted to be generous, but it was read by the other person as pressure. And I think it's interesting how, what one partner experiences as love, like paying for trips or paying off debt or whatever, can feel like, guilt or loss of autonomy for the other person. And so, even something like generosity can reinforce those, I think, power differences, even when the intentions are pure. He wants to pay off that $700 debt.
Maybe that's not her love language.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that's not her love language. I'll say, for me. I mean, I like all the love languages, but if there is a love language about, there is a love language about gifts. I love all the love languages. If there was a love language about money, I think I would probably love that one too. I accept love in all forms.
The love language of cash. Cold hard cash.
Exactly. The love language of cash.
Yeah, I think there's so many unwritten rules about how to perform class. You know, and I think that really infiltrates into so many aspects of life, including things about dating. If you're going to a restaurant, if it's a nice restaurant, you know, do you know which fork to use? Do you know what MP means on a menu? Even, you know, choice of restaurant, or if you in a social situation, you know, it's like all of these things that, you know, you could be really book smart and no one would ever have explained any of this stuff to you because it's stuff that you absorb through osmosis by being steeped in a certain economic class and having access to certain things, right? And so I think that can come up a lot too.
So true.
I mean, I also think in early dating, it's like a period where there's like a lot of selective disclosure happening, right? So people are, and in terms of finances, people are like hiding their debt, or they're softening the truth about their financial situation, or they're just not talking about money because they don't want it to kill the vibe. And I think all of those things, like that secrecy itself is money showing up.
That secrecy itself is money showing up. So true, because it's like you don't know. Yeah, you're
filling in the gaps.
You're filling in the gaps. So money and dating, as we've established, you know, it comes up in like just about every aspect, I feel like, of relationships, whether we intend for it to come up or not. And that brings me to my first question. My first big question, I should say. Does having a spouse or partner actually make life more affordable? Reema, Wailin, what do you think? Yes or no?
Yes. I think it does.
Yes.
I think it does too, because, you know, at a basic level, you're just talking about combining two incomes potentially. So that's just automatically kind of more money to spend. And so on a very basic level, yes, but Reema has some caveats. I probably have them too.
I was going to say, Reema, you said you have caveats. I want to hear them.
Yeah, I think it shows up in like a lot of the small and boring ways, like, you know, buying groceries and splitting bills and internet and all that stuff. But I do also think there are a lot of risks, because a lot of those efficiencies only work if the partnership itself is stable and fair. Because it's like a partner can introduce new expenses you wouldn't have taken on alone, right? Debt, family obligations, a lifestyle maybe you don't want, but they do, and you're supporting. Or even like well-intentioned compromises. Like I have lots of friends who like live somewhere more expensive because like their partner has a job there, or like, you know, that can quietly raise your cost of life. And then, I mean, I can go on, you can jump into it, but like, there's also like, there's also like a lot of invisible stuff, I feel like, cause like, you know, if you're not on the same page, I think like, you know, coordination takes energy. You know, when you're not aligned, that costs you time. If there's conflict, that can drain focus in ways that can affect your work and your health and all of that stuff. And so I think all those things can ripple into a marriage. But also, like, we haven't even touched on this yet, there are lots of like legal benefits.
Right, tax benefits.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I want to dig deeper on this. I mean, I think the common like knee-jerk answer to this question is yes. I will say the vice versa is maybe where some of the drawbacks can come in. It's like if your spouse loses their job or something happens to them where they need a lot more care and investment from you, then that can get quote unquote, like in a very sort of cut and dry way, more expensive, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But I think when you kind of look at it on paper, basically, like, you know, you're taking one home, dividing it in half, or dividing it in something, something other than by one. And that does make some sort of financial dent, I think, for a lot of people. But I don't know. I want to start with the explicit reasons. Like you said, that there are some real incentives. What are the on paper financial incentives for marriage?
I mean, one big one on the tax side is if one partner earns a bunch more than the other, then by combining your incomes, if you do the math a certain way, you can actually go into a lower tax bracket by filing jointly, and so that reduces your tax bill. So that is like
Wailin,
one
I did not
basic
know
way.
this. I did not know this. I had no clue. Seriously?
Yeah, it's like the math has to work a certain way, but like I was just, I think, on maybe like TurboTax website or something, reading about where they walk through an example where if there's like a big disparity between the two incomes, when you crunch the numbers, you end up paying less in taxes as if you file jointly. Yeah. I know.
That is wild. Oh my gosh.
And it's
I
like
mean,
thousands of dollars different. So
Yeah.
it's, you know, material. Yeah.
oh my, that feels like a scam. I mean, it's not, it's not, but I mean, that feels like, I mean, it feels like a scam, but I mean, I've been married for going on 4 years. And I will say, once we started like filing jointly, I kept thinking that there was like a mistake.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this can't be right. Like I must have done something wrong, or I must not have sent everything that I needed to send to our accountant or something like that. I thought there was a mistake because it was so different than the last time that we had filed separately. It was so much easier. And we either didn't have to pay as much or receive more money back. I was like, oh, I see what people are saying about like this marriage stuff, but it also made me feel like immediate guilt because there's so many people that can't take, advantage of those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I think I read somewhere that there were like, I want to say 1,000. Like there was just a lot of legal benefits within our tax system that couples can get kind of, and so I do think like our legal system really is built for married couples. Like it's not just this like social norm, like for years, tax law, welfare policy, our healthcare systems, they've been built around the assumption that like being part of a couple is the default. And so like, yeah, like we've talked about all these tax benefits, but also like health insurance coverage. A lot of employers offer health insurance benefits to spouses of employees, which can help save you up premiums and out-of-pocket healthcare costs, right? So, I mean, and if you want me to, I can still talk about the drawbacks because I've talked to a lot of people.
No. I do want to hear about those. I do want to hear about the drawbacks because I think I think it's something a lot of people don't know about and don't consider. Aside from one of the big ones, which is that like if it doesn't work out, divorce is costly and lengthy.
It's costly
and financially it can really do a lot of damage.
Or like if it doesn't work out, do you even have the financial means to exit? I've talked with multiple people over the years who've suffered essentially financial abuse. And it's not, I think people think of a financial abuse as like someone outright controlling the money or forbidding a partner from working. And that does happen a lot. But like more often it shows up through just like asymmetry and dependency. And like, if one person is earning more or owns the assets or understands the finances better, then the decisions stop becoming as mutual.
Yeah.
And, and it's like funny because like the same things, it's not funny, it's kind of sad and ironic that the same things that make coupled life cheaper, like shared rent or shared insurance or shared plans are the same things that can make it harder to leave if you are in a bad situation. Right.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this conversation I had with someone. This was like in the more extreme case, but she was in a marriage that became like slowly financially abusive. First, her husband offered to take care of the bills because he was like, no, I like got it. I can do it. And then she didn't have access to her debit card or her credit card and she didn't have cash. And then she would have to ask him for money for like the simplest things to like get diapers or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, this is like kind of veers into a different topic, but it is like a very real circumstance that a lot of people deal with in marriages.
Yeah, I will say that, on my Facebook group of local moms, which is probably 7,000 women, and it's a very active group. And it's fascinating from like a sociological, anthropological perspective too, just to see kind of what gets discussed in there. But I would say since 2020, COVID, there's a lot more divorce talk than, I was used to seeing in there. And there's so much practical advice being shared. It's like women posting in there saying like, I think I want to leave my husband or I want to leave my marriage. What do I need to do? And a lot of the advice is like, start socking away a little bit of your paycheck in a separate account. Make sure that you have enough in there that you can put down the, deposit on your own apartment and have rent money. I mean, the practical steps you have to take to disentangle yourself from a marriage. I mean, they are real and costly.
That's what this woman had to do. She just started stashing away cash on top of like the laundry machine where he never checked until she had enough to leave. Yeah.
I'll say that is something that, but that goes, I'll say I come from a family where like my parents, they met very young. They got married. They actually didn't get married that young for their age. They were together for a while before they got married. But my parents have known each other for, the overwhelming majority of their lives. They're in their 70s now, and they met as teenagers.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, really cool. Yes. It's a long and beautiful story. Very interesting. Multi-generational levels. It really could make for a novel, but we're not going to get into that right now. But both of my parents were also very, very, very direct and straightforward with me and my sisters that like, you always have to have your own money. You always have to have, even if you're not working outside the home, you have to have your own money that is yours, that is separate from your spouse's, because you just never know. You never want to be in a situation where you don't have what many people call FU money, where you don't have that and you can't, get out of the bad situation or be able to leave someone who's abusing you. But unfortunately, the way that like marriage is set up, many people don't get to have, how I put it, it's almost like kind of poo-pooed to have like real conversations about money before you're getting into it.
Yeah.
It's like people think it's like bad luck, or they don't want to think about the possibility.
Or it's gauche or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're raining on someone's parade.
The one conversation you should have, probably.
It really is. It's up there as like one of the big important conversations that you should have before deciding to get married. Many people handle their finances many different ways. There are lots of different things that people do. But at the end of the day, it takes like, I don't know, $40, 30. I paid $35, I think, for my marriage license, 30 or 35 bucks. And if my husband and I wanted to get divorced, it would cost a heck of a lot more than that.
$35.
And it would take a much longer time.
I just talked with a prenup lawyer. He was like, everyone needs to get a prenup.
Really?
Yeah. Whether you think you do or you don't, no matter your socioeconomic background, it's just, it's insurance. It's insurance. You're covering yourself, you're
I'm playing it fast and loose. I don't have a prenup, but
I don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I do have a good friend who, they're still married, and when they got together, they were both kind of like struggling actors, but he came from family means, and she didn't, and it wasn't really an issue until they were planning their wedding, and then the mother-in-law was like, prenup or the highway or whatever, and it made my friend so upset. It was like it kind of forced this conversation that made her really upset, and it didn't come up until they were planning the wedding.
Yeah, and that's a tricky position to be in, because it's like, it sounds like it would have been difficult for them to circumvent that anyway, but it might have been nice to find that out a little sooner, that was something that was definitely going to come into play, which is why I guess, like, I don't know, it's tricky because it's like it's gauche, I think, to ask about a lot of these things on a first date.
Well, prenup certainly might be a little premature.
But that prenup certainly. But this conversation is kind of raising something very funny for me, which is that like it's considered very tacky to talk about these things early on in a relationship. But then, but it's like, well, rather, it's considered. Well, there are a lot of people that press, like whether it's these sprinkle ladies on social media like Shira7 or other women who are preaching hypergamy, like looking for a man in finance, looking for a guy who's got a lot of money. And this is how you find a high value man and blah, blah, blah. Those sorts of dating tips, that dating strategy is all about right up front on the table. Do you have money or not? Are you ready to take care of me or not? But then also culturally, it's almost like considered gauche or bad luck. Or it's too uncomfortable, to borrow your word, Reema, to discuss money at any point in time after that in a relationship until like you're planning your wedding or getting divorced. It's like there's this dead zone in between where you have like some people who maybe aren't as concerned about others' feelings, who feel like, at the very beginning of a relationship, they've got to know it all. And then then basically any time between then and getting married, you're like, I don't want to know anything. And then it kind of creates a bad situation.
Yeah. Well, I've talked with people who don't know, like married couples who still don't know like how much their spouse makes or what
How do they figure that out? When they're doing the taxes, they just
don't, you know, like they're doing separate tax, you know, they're just not involved in each other's financial
like separate
lives.
accounts, so you don't see how much comes in every 2 weeks or whatever. Wow.
It's like pretty, I don't know if it's common, but I've talked with enough people that I'm like, it's not uncommon.
Interesting. But I want to complicate this a little bit though. Like we know that, yes, on paper, having a partner can make life more affordable, but I don't know. Data shows that people are delaying marriage to later in life. It seems that American life is built to privilege the coupled, but I don't know, more people are starting to spend more of their lives single than they have in more recent previous generations. I wonder, I don't know, how has this sort of like couple privilege, how has that shifted as like the sort of traditional nuclear family built on the heterosexual couple with the two kids and the breadwinner? How have things shifted as that sort of family structure has become less attractive over time?
I mean, we're talking about some really big long-term societal shifts that have to do with, I think, women and the labor market and the employment of women. So I think that, in a different era of American life, when women's options in the labor market were very constrained and women were not, educated weren't pursuing higher education in the numbers they are now, then, it was very typical to be like, okay, then like my life path is, I'm going to find someone and settle down with them and he will be the breadwinner and then I will be in charge of the home. And that was it for a long time. Then you start seeing a big shift around World War II, and in the subsequent decades, women going to college, women entering the workforce in large numbers. And now, what the data shows is that marriage rates have kind of held steady in upper income brackets, but middle class and lower, you're seeing a lot less marriage. And one reason that's been put forward as a possible explanation, not the entire explanation, but one explanation is that how should I put this? There's maybe fewer marriageable men out there in the eyes of women because, there's been this hollowing out of the working class, fewer manufacturing jobs. And so if you are a woman in that social class, that academic class, you might look around and say, I have a job, I have a college degree, or, I have my own resources now. I don't need to get married. And if the marriage pool doesn't seem very desirable because there's like a bunch of guys who maybe are unemployed, underemployed, whatever, then whatever. I'll just be fine on my own. I don't need a man.
We've discussed this on the show. We've definitely we definitely discussed this on the show. And it bears out in the statistics as well. And it's like the opposite in upper classes. It's the opposite for people who are high earners, or who have obtained a lot of education and have high earning potential, where there are, because of institutional sexism, there are way more men at sort of like the top of our earning brackets than women. And so there's this sociological phrase I want to bring up called assortative mating. It basically means like gets with like people who tend to have the same levels of education, who have the same sort of earning potential, and also the same sort of values around those things. They tend to end up with each other. And we'll get into some trends that we've seen around that more recently in a minute. But for now, like that idea of assortative mating is if that's how you are dating, which is how many people are dating and coupling up, that's what the trend is, then if you're going to be looking for someone who's making the kind of money that you're making or has the potential to, or has the kind of education that you have, and in those upper classes, that's where you're going to see a lot more men, because there are fewer women who've been able to actually like overcome institutional sexism to achieve that kind of income parity. And so the women if they're choosing to stay again in that social group,
Right.
in that social class, then I wouldn't say that. I don't think any woman that I know would say that she feels that she has her pick. I don't know if she would say
No,
that.
I can't think of any single.
Yes, I can't think of a
feel
single
like
woman I
that right now.
know who would say, "Oh, I've got my pick of like rich guys to choose from." But there just tends to be a lot more, like the ratio of men to women is a lot higher than among sort of like lower class or like working class, middle class people who are like interested in dating and available to date, or what many women or men would consider someone who's like a reasonable match or reasonably single.
Yeah. And I think there's just so much social stratification in American society, right? Where if you think about, you know, having friendships across socioeconomic classes, dating across socioeconomic classes, I'm just not sure it really happens all that much, right? Like if you end up going to a 4-year college, then you're with other people who are at a 4-year college, and then you're coming out with your degree and you're getting a certain kind of job, and maybe you're living in a certain neighborhood in a certain kind of city. And it's like, are you realistically going to find a life partner who has a very different level of education, who has a very different economic background? It just like society is not set up for people from really different economic classes to even like interact. You know what I mean? In a meaningful
I think
way.
about that all the time.
In a social
It's
way,
like, yeah. Like we're all so economically segregated in a lot of ways with our neighborhoods and the schools, and even just like a huge part of dating is just who you regularly encounter, right? Like what you're doing in your hobbies, who you're hanging out with, who your friends are bringing around. And so those are all class spaces. Even like social apps aren't neutral. It's like you know, where people are traveling to, like we were talking about earlier, what restaurants they're eating, that kind of creates a sorting.
I'm glad you bring that up, because something that I've seen is some research that I've come across recently indicates that, like, I don't know, like all of this dating and mating and marrying is very related to wealth inequality and the way it shows up in American society. Going back to the idea of assortative mating, according to research, it has sharply risen in recent years. And it has risen in a pattern that's very similar to the way that income inequality has sharply risen in recent years in America. I wonder, I don't know, I don't think anybody, when they're going out on their individual dates and trying to find love in their individual lives, is thinking about how their dating choices are potentially feeding into income inequality in America. But I'm wondering, like, is that something that you all have seen in your work? Is that a pattern that you've noticed as well? I'd love to hear more about it.
I think that does make a lot of sense, because we've been talking about how people are not dating and marrying across class very much, right? So if people in high income brackets are finding each other and partnering up together, that's an automatic kind of consolidation of income and wealth at that high level, right? And so you're not seeing the same level of social mobility than maybe what existed in the past. And I think there is a lot of economic research around social mobility and what it takes to really help people move up the ladder and stuff, and lots of theories as to what works and what doesn't. But I do think that without social mobility, you are not going to fix the inequality problem.
That's so real. Yeah, and I think, like we've been talking about, high income, like people who make more income, I think are less likely to seek partners who are going to like add volatility. And I also saw some research about how like lower in like folks who are making less feel pressure to delay commitment until they feel more stable. So there's that dynamic too. But yeah, it's like, I think so much of it, like not just like in an unequal economy, but partnership is like about who can absorb risk. And like, I think people don't just like date people that they like. They want, like oftentimes they date people whose lives feel compatible under risk.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many interesting dynamics there. And like the fact that marriage only amplifies inequality is so like, because it's like what we were talking about. It's like people with similar incomes, they end up qualifying for better mortgages, they live in safer neighborhoods, they have access to, you know, better school systems. And then meanwhile, people who aren't partnering or partner across larger income gaps, they're like facing fewer institutional benefits and they have more exposure to shocks. And so it's like, yeah, it kind of creates more stratification.
I have one more question. So often, we talked about sort of like how across class, I think women do not necessarily feel like in heterosexual partnerships and in heterosexual dating and mating and marrying and all this stuff that they have their pick of men. Statistics show that women who are of lower socioeconomic status feel this way, who are, they don't feel like there are as many marriageable or men around, or guys who are dating material, or who have enough employment and money to help contribute to like a growing family, let's say. But also women of higher socioeconomic classes often say those same things in terms of their experiences with dating. There are a lot of social reasons as to why they might not be feeling the men right now. We've talked about them on our show. There's plenty of episodes I can point you to. And I think it's been talked about a lot in culture. There are so many social and cultural and political reasons why men and women are not seeing eye to eye right now, romantically. But there is this pervasive idea, and I, in my own experience, I have seen that this is something that cuts across socioeconomic status, it cuts across class. Is that like if a woman has a lot of education, or she has work experience, or just has her stuff together, like has her own place, has her own car, is able to take care of herself in some way, regardless of where she falls on the ladder. The message that they often get is like, that no man's going to want you or something like that, or if you have your own XYZ. And we can see across, I'll also say that like there's also this other sort of dating myth that I see around, which is that like, you shouldn't, like no woman should date a man unless he's able to, like no woman should ever be splitting bills 50-50 with a man. Right. Women should only be with a guy who can cover everything. Yes. We know the truth, which is that is not most people's reality. Most people's reality in dating and in marriage is that they are splitting bills.
Yeah. But it is out there. It's such a strong cultural message. Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like both of these messages are very, 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 very gendered. They're very gendered. But they're so pervasive, even though the data doesn't necessarily show that is how like reality is lived and experienced by most people who are in these situations. Why do these narratives continue to persist? Like they're so strong. They're so culturally strong. They're so culturally strong that like, yeah, they're so culturally strong. Why do they persist even when the data tells us a completely different story?
Well, it's a big question. I think something that's interesting, and I'm curious if you all came across this kind of data. I saw recently that, there is like a strong cultural expectation that men provide financially in dating and in relationships. But I also saw this paper that was published a couple of years ago that was like, oh, we surveyed 500 college students and asked them, who do you expect to pay for dates and who actually does? And men did pay for most of the dates, about 90% of the time. And like what was interesting is that the expectations lined up with the behavior. So like about 80% of the men expected that they'd pay on the first date. And just over like half of women expected men to pay too. And this held true even though people describe themselves as progressive. So maybe I'm actually saying the opposite of what you're saying in some ways, but like, and that's just like one data set. But I do think there is like a strong, like pervasive cultural message out there that men provide. And I do actually think based on like some of the data that I've seen that happens, but then the idea is after a while it kind of fades, right? That doesn't become the norm. It's more so like the first or second date or, And I think that's because like those traditional scripts are so ingrained in us, and no matter how modern our dating is, and that we feel some compulsion to follow that. But like you said, it's once reality hits and you start dating and you are like financially together, that's not tenable.
Oh, go ahead, Wailin. You're nodding. I see you nodding.
Yeah, no, I was nodding, especially when Reema was saying how ingrained these scripts are. I mean, you think about when women were allowed to have like credit cards, like checking accounts under their own name. It actually wasn't that long ago.
No.
So if we're talking about, moving on from literally generations, entire, generations of human existence that are built on the idea of like a traditional family, a man and a woman, where the man is the breadwinner, right? Like, it's just, this stuff takes a long time to walk back, right? Or to change. And even, I am independent, progressive, female, whatever, like I don't like taking out the garbage. You know what I mean? Like, like, I mean, I'll just let the garbage pile up until my husband is like, oh, okay, I'm going to take out the garbage. And, and I don't like doing car stuff. And this stuff is like so ridiculously gendered, but I guess I'm falling for it, right? It's just like internalized, whatever, patriarchy, misogyny, whatever. I don't know, but it's hard to root out.
It is, but it is interesting because I think there are some shifts that are happening, like we've been talking about, in that, women's income is keeping a lot of households afloat right now. Like I saw a stat that said that like 40% of mothers, I think back in 2023, a couple of years ago, were breadwinners. And so there's like, I do think the research is showing that like some of the traditional models are loosening.
Yeah.
But the important piece, and I think like sort of what you're getting at too, is like, can our culture and policies actually catch up with this change?
I mean, that's the big question.
That's the big question.
That's the big question. It sounds like, that's the big question. Even when you look at like statistics among young men and boys, across racial groups, across our culture, you're seeing that they are falling behind sometimes in terms of school and employment, and like academic performance, and girls are surging ahead. It's like, to your point, Reema, like, do we have the policy? Do we have the culture to keep up with that shift? And also like, are we actually imaginative enough to be able to build or even envision a future where it's not like, where maybe, I don't know, maybe half of women and maybe half of men are the breadwinner of their household or out earn their spouses.
Yeah, or there are policies that guarantee like paid family leave. I don't know.
I was going to say, like, paid family leave, we don't have it in the US. And
exactly. More accessible childcare. Like, are there ways that we can sort of like, are we even imaginative enough to be able to envision a future where it could be where that's possible, right? But also B, where it's not stigmatized. I don't know. I don't know.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well, oh my gosh, Reema, Wailin, thank you both so much. I am so happy.
This was so fun
to have this conversation.
This was fun.
Yeah, this was great. I would love to come back and just chat.
That's all for today, but stay tuned. We've got more video episodes with even juicier topics coming soon, and you won't want to miss it. Remember to hit the follow button on Spotify and to follow NPR podcasts on YouTube. See you soon.